This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
Tonight, we also welcome our newest celebrity guest. She's an author and film critic for In Session Film, Geek Vibes Nation, and Keith Loves Movies. Please welcome Jaylan Salah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We're glad to have you. So, what is it that you write about on In Session Film and Geek Vibes Nation?
Mostly film reviews, but I also interview artists and cinematographers, like makeup and hair designers, stuff like that. I just like everything, every aspect of the filmmaking process. But on In Session specifically, I write op-eds. On Keith Loves Movies, I interview also, like my interviews are posted, you know what I mean? Like sometimes they're written interviews, sometimes they're just video stuff like we're doing right now. But on In Session, I love op-eds. I love lengthy, like analytical essays on cinema and stuff. So this is what I basically do.
So, you are subject to our new guest questions, which may or may not be easy for you. I know that for some guests, these have been a little bit difficult, at least recently. So the first one up is usually, hopefully, an easy, ease you into it question. But please tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why you love movies.
I'm basically just a literary person, an artistic person, someone who just loves the wild, loves art. And thankfully, I made my career lean into that. So I'm a translator and I'm a poet. I write film criticism articles and stuff like that. And I love movies because I think I was raised a cinephile. It usually happens with your parents, if you're lucky. My parents were like crazy movie buffs, each with their own set of film, like moods and tastes and stuff like that. So we always had a movie and we went to the cinema like crazy, like the movie theater or something. We always went to. It was unquestionable. We went to see plays too at the theater, even when we were kids. So it was just a very artistic upbringing, I think, even more than, like sporty one and stuff. We didn't have that.
Yes, this show can definitely appreciate the multi-generational vibe that cinephilism, I suppose would be the word for it, can be.
Definitely.
So, the dreaded second question. What is your favorite movie and why?
Okay, so I have like many favorite movies, but there is one that I would argue to the moon. I don't want anyone coming near it. If I make new friends, I usually let them stay away from it because if they hate it, you're on my bad side. It's In the Mood for Love, directed by Wong Kar-wai. It's like my film, like it's my pyramid. You know what I mean? Like no one come near this movie. Anytime I'd watch it, I'd feel like a cinephile, like a fan, like a person discovering the love of art for the first time. I adore Wong Kar-wai's films, but this one kind of culminates what it means, like first to be a cinephile and to be a fan of Wong Kar-wai. So this movie is in my heart.
It is near the top of my to-watch list. I have still never seen it.
You have to at least, even if you don't like, I want to know your take on it, even if you don't like it, but you just have to watch it. It's an experience. It's one in a lifetime. It's a bucket list now for, like the romantics.
Which I am, and those movies really appeal to me. So it is going to be on the show. I will figure out a way to get it on here. It's just a matter of when, not if.
You should. I can see you watching it and just gushing about it because I can't stop about it. And I watched it 10 years ago, and I keep watching it, as in my personal anniversary of, falling in love.
All right, so third and final question. What makes a good movie for you?
For me, it has to be a very intense artistic experience. Sometimes there are great movies, but okay, you're great, fine, goodbye. Like, wow, taking film student class, hello. But it has to feel intense because I'm a very passionate person, too passionate for my own good, I think. So it has to be something that evokes intense feelings in me, whether even, like repulsive, weird hatred feelings, or just, like feelings that I'm in awe of humanity or nature or the existence of art in general. Great cinematography. I don't really care about the script or the actors most of the time. Director driven. Okay, sure. Yeah, I like style, but it has to be great cinematography, great something. Like, I have to take something out of the film and feel like, it's mine. Like, maybe this scene, maybe this fleeting moment, maybe the way they are fetishizing something, maybe it's just the way the camera work moves. So, yeah, a bit of this and that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. And now that the audience has gotten to know you, let's get into the rest of our evening, which, as you all probably know by now, that if you are listening to this, is Joker, the infamous 2019 comic book film by writer and director Todd Phillips, celebrating its 5th anniversary and with the sequel about to come out in the next few weeks. Written with Scott Silver, music by Hildur Gudnadóttir, starring Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker, or I guess in this case, Arthur Fleck is more accurate, given that that's what he's referred to the most in the film. Robert De Niro as Murray Franklin, Zazie Beetz as Sophie Dumond, Frances Conroy as Penny Fleck, Brett Cullen as Thomas Wayne, Bill Camp as Detective Garrity, Shea Wiggum as Detective Burke, Mark Maron as Gene Ufland, Sharon Washington as Arthur's social worker, Josh Pays as Hoyt Vaughn, and Brian Tyree Henry as the clerk. Recognition for this movie? Joker was wide released on October 4th, 2019. While many critics were mixed in the reaction to the film, Joker would go on to set several records for the box office during its run, including highest grossing R-rated film, since surpassed recently by Deadpool and Wolverine, highest grossing October release, and the first R-rated film to gross over $1 billion. Joker would also garner 11 Oscar nominations, the most for a comic book-based film, including Best Picture, director for Todd Phillips, adapted screenplay for Todd Phillips and Scott Silver, sound editing, sound mixing, cinematography, makeup and hairstyling, costume design, and film editing, winning for Best Actor for Joaquin Phoenix and original score for Gudnadóttir. There are many cultural references throughout the world from the film, including several instances by rebellious political groups in Russia, Chile, Lebanon, France, and Hong Kong. One of the locations seen in the film, a set of stairs in the Bronx, New York City, has been dubbed the Joker Stairs. The stairs have also become a tourist destination and the subject of internet memes, with visitors often reenacting the scene from the film in which Fleck dances down the stairs in his Joker attire. In 2020, Deadline listed it as one of the 21 most influential films of the 21st century so far. It also ranked 39th on Empire's list of the 100 greatest movies of the 21st century. Joker was intended to be a standalone film with no sequels, but as I mentioned before, Warner Brothers greenlit a follow-up project, Joker Folie à Deux, with Phoenix and Beetz reprising their roles and Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn. This is set to be released in a few days from this episode's release on October 4th, 2024, exactly 5 years to the day of the original wide release of the first film. Joker currently holds a 69% rating among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 59 score on Metacritic, and a 3.9 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So as we begin each week, Dad, what is your relationship, or lack thereof, to this film?
Lack thereof, because I didn't see it until we watched it in preparation for this episode.
See, and you keep telling me that you try and keep up with me by watching all the Best Picture nominees, and I could have sworn that you claimed that you had watched all the 2019 Best Picture nominees.
No,
I know that
the only one I did not get.
Okay, because I know there's a couple of other select years, like 2021. You didn't see Drive My Car. That was like
Correct.
The only one you missed out on.
Yeah, I've tried to get them, but this I never got to, and I think in part was because I did not believe I would like it, and I was correct.
So, I don't know if it's available to be found. The earliest version of this website, our website, had some very sparse film reviews by yours truly when I was actually writing them as opposed to when we did them. And I think this was the first one that I did when you had told me specifically I should be writing reviews. And I said, who the hell wants to know what my opinion is? But I wrote it because, as many in the audience may know, and happy Batman Day in recording futures to everyone. I think it was yesterday, although I thought it was today. Even so, it was released, I think, 86 years ago. So happy Batman Day to everyone. The Joker film and the rest of it holds a special place for me as an amateur Batman historian. I have special place in my heart for what I call to be the second most influential and important character in Western literature. Only behind, you want to take a guess who I think is number one?
Define literature.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to define it for you. I've already loosely defined it by including Batman as a literary hero.
I mean, it depends on your thing. You could say Jesus Christ. You could say Mohammed. You could say all kinds of people, depending on your religious beliefs and or lack thereof, and how broadly you list literary.
Okay, so you make a good argument that potential religious figures aside, I meant more fictitious.
Okay.
And also, I think that would also fall under the definition of what you consider to be Western literature. As the Middle East, I'm not sure would fall necessarily under Western civilization, per se.
Not anymore, but okay.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to define it here. Anyway, I was going to have you guess for the fun of it, but you've now ruined the moment, so I'm going to just say...
Well, I'll guess. Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, ding ding.
Ooh.
Sherlock Holmes is the first true hero of the modern era for fiction, and I believe he's the most influential, not only from detective standpoint, but just kind of a hero, an action figure standpoint as well. Anyway.
Sometimes you throw a dart at the wall and you hit it.
Yeah. Or maybe you have very similar thinking to your own son. Who knows?
Could be.
But either way, my history with this movie is I did not particularly care for it at the time. I have softened on it on this third watch, although I don't know if I will ever watch this film again. But there are elements of it from the comic book side of this film that do bother me as to how it relates to the larger Batman universe. Particularly what gets under my skin is when you kind of desecrate the Waynes, Thomas and Martha, and unnecessarily include them into something or like shoehorn them in for some unknown reason. Such as the ambiguous plot where Thomas Wayne may or may not be the illegitimate father of the Joker. I mean, I thought it was bad enough when Tim Burton made the Joker the killer of Batman's parents. But then to make the Joker his half-brother just seems like a bridge too far for me. But that aside, as far as the film goes, I think we'll have a robust discussion on this one because it is full of controversy as to whether or not it's essentially Taxi Driver light. So, Jaylan, what is your relationship to the film?
My relationship is that I watched it at a very terrible time in my life. So definitely I loved it. Like, life is screwed, what a great film to go and weep, and feel like injustice of the world, everything sucks, yay, awesome, come on, Arthur, kill them all. So definitely that was the film of 2019 for me. I was like writing in the movie theater, like, yes, do it. So yeah, die all of you. So it was just amazing at the time. Now that I'm a happier woman, I watched it and I was like, why are you doing this to yourself, girl? I'm not that big on like superhero and life versions. Like for me, Catwoman is the best literary figure out there. Kill them all, girl, just whip him. So for me, superhero stuff is more like latex, like all the kind of cool BDSM stuff. But if you ask me like an expert, no, I'm no expert. So it felt like a non-superhero film for me. It felt like a non-canon film for me. It could be a very great social justice film when you look at it from this context. So of course, being like Thomas Wayne's son, no, gross. Even back then I was like, kill this plot line, thank you. But great film like that, it's not rewatchable. Now that I watch it, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? Hating every minute of my life, tormented, because it's just so sad and bleak, and there's a lot of injustice in it. And I realized, like, oh, wow, I was so messed up in 2019. Glad I'm away from this. So it was definitely something that I watched with this rage inside me. But now I watch it as in, like, what a bad night. Better, like, eat some popcorn.
Well, congratulations for being in a better place, but I don't know what that says to anybody that actually still likes this movie.
Yeah.
I think my biggest criticism at the time was I didn't know why we needed to incorporate the aspects of the comic book character other than to get people's asses in the seats. I think this movie would be so much better if it didn't have some of those elements and was more specifically based on the character that the Joker is originally from, the 1928 horror film The Man Who Laughs, based on the Victor Hugo novel and starring Conrad Veidt, where it has no actual comic book association. But how many people are going to go out to a film unless it's truly a horror film that's called The Man Who Laughs?
With Conrad Veidt, who no one knows, and only a few cinemaphiles remember he was the Nazi in Casablanca.
Well, that's why I mention him.
I love this film.
We've discussed Casablanca 3 times. People should know him if they're listening to our show.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Any other thoughts that... do you like the comic book elements? Are you confused by them? I don't think either of you are nearly as inundated with the comic book atmosphere as I am. And specifically, I mentioned my father because he turned to me yesterday. Okay, how does this relate to the Batman universe?
I love your father.
I mean, I've seen the Batman films, and at least I don't necessarily love the comic book element, but at least it made sense. This just looked like, all right, we're just going to take the broad outline and we're just going to throw a few tropes that will, bring in people who go to the Marvel films. And then we're going to go off into some really dark, dank place and pretend that we're doing something psychological when it's really nothing more than we're writing about a sociopath and making him into a hero. Yeah. Nothing goes bad in today's world by glorifying a sociopath.
I mean, we had this conversation back when we last covered Taxi Driver, and frankly, the first time we covered Taxi Driver, that I think these films have relevance because they are speaking to a smaller or marginalized portion of our general society or our culture that maybe we don't understand. But I have some criticisms regardless of how this handles the knowing nature or the sympathy that this film is supposed to have. So I guess, if I were to explain what the film is actually about, there's 2 ways to really look at it. You could be very forgiving on one side of it, that it's meant to provide the sympathy and or understanding toward people with severe mental health or structurally disadvantaged people in our general society. I think a lot of the film is set up to be that we're supposed to have sympathy for the Joker and that his circumstances and how much he was abused and his mental illness by way of physical abuse is something to be, I don't know, forgiving to a degree for, up until the point where he becomes ultimately violent. But then at the same point, you could be unforgiving in your take of what the film is actually about in saying that it not only forgives, but creates a viable option where violence, and particularly like lethal violence, is a viable option to solve your problems.
The difference between this film and Taxi Driver is as follows. Even though he was a sociopath and it was violent, he ultimately perpetrated his violence against other sociopaths or violent people to try to obtain some level of good. That's not this film. This film, basically, they make every aspect. Why, of course, would you make the 3 guys he first murders Wall Street types? Because ultimately, maybe Wall Street types do not attack individuals on trains very often, but they certainly do economically attack a lot of people in this country and screw them over. And this film just basically tells you we can just take, if we're wrong, we can take it into our own hands and extract our own vengeance.
So I think you make a good point on that. I would say the one major difference that stuck out to me in watching this again is that in Taxi Driver, there's an assumed or maybe a dreamlike quality at the end of the film praising Travis Bickle for his violence on the behalf of another, that he's being a savior. And so he's rewarded for that. Wherein the Joker here is publicly rewarded by everybody rioting and looting and destroying the city, essentially in his name. So what to me that says is that in a Travis Bickle case, it's ambiguous of whether or not he gets admiration for his vigilantism. But in the Joker's case, he gets his just desserts. He sees that he is actually a credible figure for the first time in his life. He exists. So we're kind of giving poor reinforcement of bad decisions and his decision to administer violence on the general public by reinforcing that his decisions are things that people admire.
We are condoning and giving admiration to vigilance.
Is the Joker really a vigilante, though? Like, what does
his own surprise or his own self-taught? He's seeking vengeance against all those who've done him wrong.
But doesn't a vigilante have to have some like certain ingrained moral code that they're trying to adhere to? Like Travis Bickle, even despite his faults, has some level of moral code, as you kind of alluded to.
Yes.
I think the Joker's more in the vein of an anarchist than he is necessarily a vigilante.
Well, he's trying to extract his own pound of flesh for all the wrongs that have been perpetrated against him. If you don't want to call that a vigilante and you want to call it something else, feel free. But what I'm telling you is this basically is an anthem for all those people who do mass shootings in this country. And it's basically saying, well, okay, here's a movie to emphasize that you yourself can do the same.
And potentially could be rewarded for it, much like the January 6th rioters. Jaylan, what did you think of the film? What do you think it's about?
I think for me, it's a very less mature film than Driver and even V for Vendetta. You know what I mean? Because V for Vendetta, this is anarchism, full stop. We're not trying to sugarcoat anything. This is the anarchist, mindset. A Taxi Driver, I never identified with Trav. I didn't even like him. I was repulsed by him. The way he even was seeking this woman who liked him and he took her to see porn. Like, I was like, no, gross. Just get him out of my sight. So it was very real and raw and bare and kind of like took things to what they really are. Here you can feel the emotional manipulation a little bit, like they're baiting you in. First with the comic book aspect or elements of it, and then with the idea of sympathizing with the character, which for me is like a less mature filmmaking choice than when you have something like Taxi Driver or, when it's V for Vendetta. Let's just do a fantastical thing and he's always wearing a mask so you don't even know the dude. How hot. So here, no, you have him in your face and you're trying to make this just, a kind of like a sad tragedy when it's not. And at the same time, your target audience, who will sympathize with Arthur. So it's just, for me, I really like it, but for what it is, you know what I mean? It's a good film about social justice from the idea of, let's take over the city. But at the same time, you can see how sneaky it is, you know what I mean? Because it sends the wrong messages. It would come to people at a wrong time in their lives and they'll be like thinking about whoever bullied them when they were like in second grade and kind of spat in their face. So it's not a mature filmmaking, but I don't think Todd Phillips has this depth as a filmmaker too. So yeah, I could feel that I like some aspects of it, probably because Joaquin is a really good actor and because of some of the artsy aspects of it. I think this is what drew me to it. But when you think about it, it's very morbid, it's scary. It kind of makes you really, really feel like anxious, like your heart is just palpitating. Someone could be like on live television and just murder someone. So this is like, okay, you guys are taking it too far, especially when you're making him a hero. Like if you make him just for what he is, like for what you see Travis, who would identify with Travis Bickle? You know what I mean? Like, but here you are trying to make him a hero, but of what? What is the heroism aspect? He's even doing it for himself, and then people are following him because they identify with this idea of false martyrdom. You know what I mean? Of this victim mindset. So it's a love-hate relationship, really, but at the same time, it's not something that I would identify with, as in, like, yes, look at this amazing novel film, or even just watching a very cool, realist gross film with morally ambiguous characters, and you feel like, wow, this is so cool, but thanks, this world should stay away from me. It blurs the line, and this is, I think, the sinister vibe to it.
I would agree, only to the extent that he does get a lot of reinforcement during the film. To me, it occurs that had it not been that people start popping up in Joker masks and there are going to be these rallies and the rest of it, so he feels that the public is on his side, even if they don't necessarily know who he is. It's the first time that he actually gets some level of positive feedback or reinforcement that he matters in life to almost anyone outside of maybe his mother, and then he has that even undone. That relationship, the one thing that he kind of semi holds on to as someone who cares, even to the point of the end of the film where he rewards, I guess, if you will, or lets go the one person who he claims was nice to him at all. Everybody else is in the crosshairs.
Yeah. And I will point out, this is not a film about anarchy, because if it were true anarchy, everybody would be out for themselves. Instead, they rally behind him. This is a political movement based upon his concept of righting all of the wrongs that have been done to me, and you too can have all the wrongs that have been done to you righted.
So, Dad, you ready to dig more into the film? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. Gotham, a city drenched in neon lights and shadows, where the line between reality and delusion blurs. Arthur Fleck, Joaquin Phoenix, a failed comedian and part-time clown, navigates this urban labyrinth as his mind unravels further each day. His existence is a series of humiliations and rejections, a slow burn of despair that ignites into a violent, chaotic inferno. In this dreary setting, the narrative delves deep into Arthur's psyche, exploring his transformation from a marginalized outcast into the infamous Joker. The film is a character study of a man pushed to the brink with a meditation on isolation, mental illness, and the corrosive effect of society that abandons its most vulnerable. Arthur's journey is not just a descent into madness, but a twisted quest for identity and purpose in a world that has stripped him of both. This is a tale of existential dread and the search for meaning in a world that offers none, a dark and haunting reflection of the human condition.
Thank you. Did you know? Todd Phillips described Joaquin Phoenix's take on Arthur as, quote, a guy who is searching for identity who mistakenly becomes a symbol. His goal genuinely is to make people laugh and bring joy to the world. Did you know? The filmmakers cite Alan Moore's comic, The Killing Joke, the very famous Killing Joke that has been the basis for most Joker stories in film, which tells the Joker's origin and descent into insanity, as well as the Martin Scorsese films Taxi Driver from 1976, Raging Bull from 1980, and The King of Comedy from 1982 as influences on the film. Did you know? Joaquin Phoenix based his laugh on videos of people suffering from pathological laughter. He also sought to portray a character with which audiences could not identify. Pathological laughter is a real-life disorder which causes the patient to suffer from uncontrollable laughter attacks in response to tense or stressful situations. Although the disorder isn't usual, these attacks can stop the normal flux of oxygen to the brain or lungs, causing hypoxia or even asphyxia in the patient. Joaquin Phoenix called perfecting the Joker's laugh the toughest part of playing the character. Did you know? In a recent interview with SFX magazine, Joaquin Phoenix acknowledged that while the violence in Joker is a little more visceral and raw than films such as the Avengers series, he didn't have any hesitation about it. Quote, "You always want to feel real, and you want the little violence that we have to have an impact," he said. "What happens in a lot of movies is that you get numb to it, you're killing 40,000 people, you don't feel it. While being a fictional story in a fictional world, you always want it to feel real. Everything that happens in this movie as far as violence goes, you feel it." Did you know? The joke, quote, "When I was a little boy and told people I was going to be a comedian, everyone laughed at me. Well, no one's laughing now," is a paraphrase of a joke written by much beloved late British comedian, actor, and music hall vaudeville performer Bob Monkhouse's "People used to laugh at me when I wanted to be a comedian. Well, they're not laughing now." Interestingly, Bob Monkhouse famously had hundreds of handwritten books of jokes that he had written for over his long career in much the same vein as Arthur's joke book. And with that, we will take our first break, and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 231st episode, we welcome new guest Peterson W. Hill, co-host of the War Starts at Midnight podcast, and our most frequent guest, Christine Duncan, to discuss Gone Girl for its 10th anniversary. Directed by David Fincher, written by Gillian Flynn, music by Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor, starring Ben Affleck, Rosamund Pike, Tyler Perry, Neil Patrick Harris, and Carrie Coons. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Jaylan, before we get into the rest of the episode, where can people find you and what are you working on?
Currently, I'm working on a very interesting piece about the duality of nature of Catwoman, so I can't wait for it to get published. Yeah, I think it's going to surprise you, Thomas, since you're a comic book fan. So yeah, let's see. And I'm also working on more interviews. Usually I just reach out to cinematographers, just composers, whatever. And I think I have a bunch and I'm excited about them. And I'm working, of course, as could be expected. People can find me on Twitter at Jaylan_Salah and on Instagram at Jaylan Salman and the J Days YouTube channel where I just post my reviews and collaborations with friends and stuff. So yeah, this is where they can find me.
Okay, great. And we'll have all of your links both in the episode description as well as on the website. So if anyone wants to find you, they can find you there.
Yay.
All right, that takes us into our weekly, at least until we cancel this segment for lack of questions, Ask Dana Anything. We do not have any listener questions, but we do have some guest questions. So I will give over the hosting duties to our guest. Jaylan, take it away.
Okay, Dana. So what I want to know is what got you into podcasting?
My son.
Okay.
So he was all anxious and all excited about it, and he had me start listening to some, and I thought it would be... so much of law is not being creative that I miss having a creative atmosphere. And so when he suggested it, I'm like, sure, why not? It gives me an opportunity to do something more creative and outside of my normal channels. It kind of makes me spread my wings a bit.
Wow. I love it. So what else makes you spread your wings?
I really enjoy art. I enjoy art history. I enjoy music and especially things like classical music and such, where I have an opportunity to do more. I would love to take up painting. That's something I'd like to do yet at some point in my life. I do have some interest in writing myself and hope that I can at some point in time write history, but writing history more as a novel, the novelistic history where it's not, this person did this on this date, but it's you tell the story of individuals and you make the characters lifelike within the context of the book. There are several, Candace Millard, Eric Larson. I mean, David McCullough, before he passed, did a lot of that. So there's several of these writers who, Robert Caro, actually, for his biography series on Lyndon Johnson, writes so well. He makes the people in it seem almost fictionalized.
If only he wrote more often.
Well, eventually that last part will come out, but we'll see.
You'd like to think so. I mean, he's what, 80?
I think he's like 84, 85.
Yeah.
He's been working on the last part for about 10 years.
Awesome. Okay, so your earliest movie watching experience, because I think it should be definitely something different from mine and Thomas, for example. So I don't know your earliest movie watching experience.
I'm trying to think back when I was a kid. When I was really small, I got really into the history of World War II. And so I probably 5, 6 years old, started reading magazines on the history of World War II. And I remember watching The Dirty Dozen with my dad one night. And that just really got me. I mean, I was just like really into that.
Add that to a list of movies you watched way too young.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, it was, I'm trying to remember what other movies I watched with my dad when I was really young. First time I went to the outdoor theater, we saw True Grit, the original with John Wayne. I really loved that. It was kind of one of those things whenever True Grit was on television, my dad and I always watched it. I think the first time I went to an actual movie theater was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with Paul Newman and Robert Redford. But it was always one of these, because when I was a kid, you had network television, and networks, usually each network had one night a week where they showed a film. It was an inexpensive way of showing a film and not having to pay for television programming, etc. And so my dad would put these on. And so I remember sitting and watching. I remember, it must have been about 6 or 7 when I watched The Magnificent Seven. And I think it was about the same time that I first watched The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
A lot of Westerns in here.
Yeah.
All dads. Like my dad, I grew up on Westerns because of my dad. So it's a dad thing. I think when you're a cinephile, your dad is definitely going to get you through the Western experience first, and then anything else comes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, my dad wasn't a huge Western guy. He didn't watch Gunsmoke. He didn't watch Bonanza, any of those shows. But when movies, yes, and war films, a lot. I remember when Patton came out, he made me sit down and watch Patton with him.
Wow.
When it was first on network TV. That had been about 72, 73.
Definitely. Okay. So I want to ask you, why did you love movies? Like, why movies as a medium? Because I feel like you like the arts in general, but what is it about movies that we love? And why did you, pass it on to Thomas?
And I always tell this story, and I'll tell it again, but my dad grew up in a very troubled home. And one of the things he could do was he and his uncles, who were just about the same age as he was, they could go along the railroad tracks and pick up coal that fell off the train. And if you filled a bucket, you could get a dime at the station house. And so that would get you into the movie and get you a bag of popcorn and the Saturday mornings, which was the cartoons, the news features, the serials, the little pieces like the Stooges and all those. And then you'd get the A film and the B film. And so he was always huge in movies. And just from little on, that was the one thing. My dad was, Tom can attest to this, a man of very few words.
That might be an understatement.
If you could answer a question in 6 words, 3 were enough. If you could answer a question in 3 words, 1 was enough. And if you could avoid that and just grunt or nod, that was even better.
Awesome.
And so a lot of times, I don't know, it brings me back. It's a connection with him that I never felt I had. And that's one of the reasons why, because the 2 things we did, we watched movies together and we watched the Green Bay Packers. And when I was a kid, they stunk. And it was really bad. And most of the time, that was when he was the most animated, was when they were playing really bad. He'd get very angry. He'd threaten to throw the pop bottle that he was drinking at the TV. He would storm around the house. It was bad. And so to this day, there's a certain element of watching the Packers is a connection to my dad. Watching movies is a connection to my dad.
And we've done both today.
Yes, we have.
Yes. Okay. Love asking you questions, Dana. Thank you for your generosity with the answers.
No, it's no problem. Thank you for asking.
Well, thank you very much for your questions, Jaylan, and thank you to anyone who has submitted them before. If you do enjoy this segment, we would encourage you to reach out to us via any of our social media comments or direct messages, or via our email. That is greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMoat podcast. And that's Ronnie with a Y, not an I-E, and Gmoat, Gmoat. You can also find us at Gmoat Podcast on any of our social platforms. That includes TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Letterboxd, and Twitter. Let's take it back into our regular programming then. Dad, we left off at Best Performance. Who do you have down?
The Academy Award winner, Joaquin.
It's kind of an obvious pick.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we really need to discuss all that much? I mean, he, for the most part, carries the movie. Like, I think I was blinded initially by his performance due to my own issues with the film overall, not only from a context standpoint, but as well as like the comic book stuff that kind of generally annoyed me. But it shouldn't be considered like one of these token Oscar wins for somebody who is a great actor and they finally break through for something. At least this is a really well-deserved performance. I'm still not sure I think that he was the best actor of that particular year, but for somebody who has had such a great career, I don't mind that this is the thing that he won for, as opposed to like Scent of a Woman for Al Pacino.
Or The Revenant for...
The Revenant.
Excuse me, The Revenant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's his most forgettable performance in a Hall of Fame career for Leo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Well, you may have a bone to pick with the guest that you're appearing on the next time with us. He loves that movie. So.
It's not that bad, but the idea of, like giving Leo this, what did he get mauled by a bear? No. He has better roles. It just frustrates me.
Yeah. He was quite convincing in his groaning and grunting.
Yes, I agree. That deserves an Oscar.
All right, let's move on. Best secondary performance. I had Lawrence Sher, the cinematographer. I do think this is an exceptionally well shot film, even if I think that overall the direction leaves me wanting a bit as far as the tone and the dreariness. I don't think he's really inventing a whole lot given the way that other cinematographers and, other directors have depicted Gotham prior, particularly Tim Burton with his kind of gothic stance that we've discussed earlier this summer in Batman 89. I don't think Phillips is doing anything rare, but where I will say, as far as the framing of particular shots, the visual storytelling of this, I got a real sense that he knew what he was doing and aided to the overall effect of what the story was in this one in a way that almost nobody other than Phoenix was really contributing. Because it's such a character study of one person, it's really hard for anybody else to kind of shine through. And so I kind of had to go with a technical aspect a little bit by default. Not that I'm saying this is a lesser award because I'm giving it to him, but still, I think that Phoenix is so important to the movie that it's hard for any of the supporting actors to be near his level. So on a technical support, I mean, you could go with the other Oscar winner in this one, but I go with the cinematographer. Jaylan, who did you have?
I think I liked his mother, Frances Conroy. She was awful. She was a terrible mother. I just hate the fact that she is victimizing herself when she's honestly like a terrible mom. I don't know. Because I've had friends who had that kind of intense, like very toxic relationship with their mother. So I was just like, oh, I hate you. And she did it perfectly. I liked Zazie Beetz, not as in performance, but when you have the forgettable girl, usually she's forgettable. But I think she added like an air of freshness to her presence, which I thought was a good secondary performance. So yeah, definitely those two. And of course, when you mentioned the cinematographer, I really like cinematography here, especially the dance scenes. I really liked how they were shot. I think this was what sealed the deal for me. This is what made me fall in love with Joaquin in this role. The use of his body in the film, that was just,
Dead?
Well, I knew I wasn't going to give it to Todd Phillips as the writer or director because I didn't like his message at all. I knew I wasn't going to give it to Scott Silver. I knew I wasn't going to do it for the music because I wasn't going to try to pronounce his name.
Her.
Is it her?
It's her.
Okay. See, there we go. And so I came down to two people, De Niro and Francis Conroy. And I originally thought De Niro, and I just changed it on the way over to Francis Conroy. And so I'll agree with you, Jaylan, that I thought she did a pretty good job of mixing being this superficial mother with a whole lot of shit boiling underneath the surface.
Yes, definitely.
She definitely leaves a lot of ambiguity to the film. And it is very believable that it could go either way. Either she's not crazy and she's just, permitting abuse all over the place, or she is crazy and she's still allowing a lot of abuse to happen.
And she did do a really good sound of muffled groans and pleading.
I could detect all the good groans. Like, we should have an episode, like, the top 10 groans and grunts in film. I'm in. I'd sign up to give you my list.
All right.
Oh, boy, that's going to be a weird episode.
I need this episode.
Okay.
That'll be followed shortly by Dana's top 10 of no falls. So, I dare to question what exactly we're going to get from most charismatic. But, Dad, who do you have for most charismatic here?
The only person anybody thinks of when they talk about this film, it's Joaquin. You have no choice.
It is a little bit by default, but yes, he is so central to the movie. He is the only consummate figure that you remember anything after you're done. So, like 2 weeks from now, I won't remember half of the people that are in here other than maybe De Niro and Joaquin.
Oh, I'll remember Mark Maron.
Well, that was just because you were like, wow, Mark Maron's in this?
Because I always like Mark Maron, and when he shows up in something, I go, there's Mark Maron.
Jaylan, are you going to make it 3 for 3?
Definitely. I totally agree with Joaquin, of course, because who else? You know what I mean? I like the fact that when Brian Tyree Henry is now a name and is now someone known. But I remember when I saw him in The Clerk, I was like, wow, cool dude. Wow. Sometimes I see an actor and feel like, can't we take him out of this element and expand on him? And then this actor gets forgotten and you feel bad deep down, like, no. So when I realized, wow, that's now on the second watch, it's like Brian Tyree Henry, hello. So this is kind of charismatic because, someone who's in a fleeting role, but not really fleeting face. So I was happy to see him here, to discover I didn't see him the first time, but then he kind of stuck in my head. But of course, Joaquin, I mean, hello, he's the Joker.
All right, let's move to best scene then. I have 5 here that I would like to nominate, and then we can open it up to the floor for any other inclusions. I have the stand-up episode, so when he actually does his stand-up routine, as opposed to him just laughing in the club. Then I have confronting Thomas Wayne, so in the theater bathroom. I have Goodbye Penny, which is him killing his mother. I have the late night premiere, where he goes on with Murray Franklin, and then the ending, the maybe last 15 minutes where he's out on the streets, and you have him kind of being celebrated by the crowd, released from custody in some way, but eventually getting his way back into custody. But that entire sequence I have as well. So are there any scenes that you'd like to include that I missed?
I love Dana so much. I love your dad, like, no.
This is plenty.
Salah. I have some scenes, Thomas, and I'm gonna tell all of them. Like, although I find it's a cliche a little bit, but I love single tears. It's like when actors are like, I have the single tear, and you're like, oh baby, you want to hug him. So I love the opening scene with the single tear, and then dance, any dance, because I love dance in movies. So any dance that he made, this was a scene that I love. I could watch the dances and like discard the movie and just watch the idea of a crazy man dancing. Wow, finally a crazy man dancing and not a crazy woman dancing. Who needs? And then I think when he learns about Penny, I also like the scene a lot. Like when he learned the truth and the idea of this scary, Oedipal mother figure kind of like coming crashing down on him and realizing that he even never loved her. And this also was very liberating for me. And I was like, yeah, I hate her already. Yeah, good that you also caught on. So yeah, these scenes, definitely.
So what I have down here is the cold open. I have stand-up, bathroom dance, confronting Thomas Wayne, Arkham Asylum, Goodbye Penny, late night premiere, and out on the streets. Among these, what is the best scene?
The late night premiere, because it's like there is no going back from there. It's done. So I'll go with that.
Yeah, I think it's the culmination both of a visual and a writing storytelling that they get to that point. And I think that's why they had to get somebody like Robert De Niro to do that part. You wanted some type of name that could be of equal weight for as weighty as they're intending that scene to be. It is him finally realizing what he wants his identity to be, outing himself publicly, and then committing the final act where there's no going back.
Yeah, and it's only a fitting that it would be De Niro in that, since he sat on the other chair to Jerry Lewis, which is basically a rip-off scene. Ugh. King of comedy. Yeah. But yes, I think it was the best scene. Simply because it had the most impact on the overall evening. By the way, you were mentioning dancing. For our Indian listeners, do suggest to Bollywood the potential of ripping off Bollywood by that dance. Poorly ripped off Bollywood, let me put it that way, but still.
Okay. I haven't watched enough from that area of the world to be able to credibly say what it is or is not, but it is a white dude with his ribs showing, trying to do, like, I don't know, is it a belly dance? Or
I wish he'd do a belly dance. Like, it would be awesome. But he has to, like, wear the belly dance attire, so I kind of, like, nominate that sometime.
I think he needs some pasties and tassels if he's going to do that.
Why
Let's
not?
give him a hula hoop.
That would be amazing.
He'll achieve the same thing.
Oh, anyway, I'm sure we'll address the dancing in a later section of this show, but moving on. Favorite scene? I actually like a scene that I'm going to go a little bit off the board for. I'm going to go with the subway shootout. I do think that that's, like, again, the first real hook of the movie. It's kind of that midpoint where the movie starts to click into place. You have kind of this turn. Up until this point, he's been a tragic figure. Now he's kind of taking over, to a degree, his own life and his own choices, starting to realize who he is, and it kind of elevates the rest of the plot until we get to the climax. So for me, that would be where I would go. What do you guys have?
Killing Randall. That's favorite because it's just crazy. I try to imagine myself in place of the poor Gary. Like, imagine you seeing the workplace bully and someone he picks on, and he just kills him. And you're like one of the good people in the office. Like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I deserve to be here in this place? So for me, it's like, I don't know. It's very, very violent, but also very relatable. As in, when you see like a confrontation like this in real life, if you've ever worked in an office or whatever, and I've worked in corporate before as a pharmacist because I studied pharmacy in school. So it was always hilarious when things like this happen and you see a shift in power. Not, of course, as aggressively, but still, it's like, wow, okay, this scene was like, oh, okay, I'm afraid.
Oh, the most horrifying moment of the entire film for me is when he can't reach the lock on the door.
Like, what is he gonna do to him? Exactly. Like, no. I'm not in your mess, you guys.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for that guy in that moment.
Me too.
Yeah.
And relatable. I remember like I had like a crazy coworker at some point. She posted the scene and she's like, but I will never hurt anyone who like belittled me or wronged me at work. And I was like, you know me, honey. You really love you. I've always been good to you. Never crossed paths. She had to be fired like months later because she had like constant. Anyway, so you know this felt realistic in a very nonsensical kind of like bizarre Thomas Wayne is my dad film. But this felt like okay, no, guys.
I had the stand-up because I've been there on many an open mic night where you just see these guys come up who think they're funny and they try to be funny and they tell jokes and they're not funny. And you hear crickets, but they'll laugh. They'll laugh at their own jokes. And so this just amplified it to me. One comment about your selection, Tom. Wall Street guys don't beat up clowns on subways. Okay? They did when they were in high school. But now they're on Wall Street. So what they do is they wait until you're going to get off a train and they make up some bullshit to tell some officer or policeman to get the guy arrested. Okay, just because they think it's funny. That's the power once you get to Wall Street. It's not the physical anymore. I had a problem with that aspect of that scene for that very reason.
Wow.
Most indelible moment, I have the stairway dance. Anybody else?
It's definitely very indelible, but also you're the only one who was ever nice to me, Gary. Because it's like every time like I remember Joker, like when we were like, you're gonna watch Joker for the podcast. This is what came to mind. And I was like, no, reliving this again, guys. So yeah, this one.
I had late night. I mean, I will remember De Niro flying back in the blood against the wall, and then the body jumping when he shoots him in the chest. Again, going, oh yeah, that's right. I guess just because you get shot in the head, you will survive. Your heart doesn't necessarily know it's dead till you shoot him again. Then you shoot him in the chest, and that'll do it.
Well, that looks like a good spot for our second break on that lovely note, Pop. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, as of this last month, all of our episodes are also now in video format. That's right, you can see my resting nerd face and all of Dana's famous OKs in pristine high definition. So far, we have 14 different episodes now available to watch on YouTube. Just head to youtube.com/@GMOAT, GMOAT. Or I have the full video and audio feeds on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT. Both of those are available as well in the episode description of this episode, so check us out there, and if you do, please like the video or subscribe to us. We would really appreciate it. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Unfortunately, yes. J.D. Souther, 78, American musician and songwriter. Was renowned and often called the Fifth Eagle. He co-wrote with the Eagles Best of My Love, New Kid in Town. He wrote the song Only the Lonely, which he performed and which has been done by other musicians. Well known among Eagles fans and other people. Wrote for Linda Ronstadt, wrote for the Dixie Chicks. He wrote for a ton of people.
Not to step on your toes a little bit here, but weren't there 5 original Eagles, and so that he would be the 6th?
No, there were 4.
Okay.
Then they added Joe Walsh in about 1975 after he left
James Gang.
The James Gang.
Well, I know that these always hit you a little bit harder than they do me because these are from your era of music, and particularly you've always been a big Eagles fan, but we remember him here fondly for his contributions with a moment of silence in his honor. Thank you. All right, let's make the terrible transition to best lines. We have Arthur Fleck, as written in his notebook. The worst part of having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't.
A quote that could be heard around many a holiday dinner table in the United States. You don't listen, do you? I don't think you ever really hear me. You just ask the same questions every week. How's your job? Are you having any negative thoughts? All I have are negative thoughts.
I haven't been happy 1 minute of my entire fucking life.
Arthur Fleck. For my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed. But I do, and people are starting to notice.
Is it just me, or is it getting crazier out there?
You were the only one who was ever nice to me, Gary.
Cop. The whole city's on fire because of what you did. Arthur. I know. Isn't it beautiful?
I just hope my death makes more sense than my life.
Oh, no more like lines for me. It's like,
okay, you're out?
Yeah, I'm out. You got it.
Okay. I have a couple more here, but Murray Franklin. I'm waiting for a punchline.
Knock, knock. Who's there? It's the police, ma'am. Your son's been hit by a drunk driver. He's dead.
My last one here. Arthur. You decide what's right or wrong the same way you decide what's funny or not.
I'm out.
Okay. Let's move to the Stanley rubric then. Legacy is up first, and for anyone who is just new to listening to the show, this is a measure of the legacy of the film after the initial 5 years. So technically right now would be the 5-year anniversary. So how do we think the legacy of this film is right now as of this moment, both from the industry as well as the general casual public, let's say? I don't think podcasters necessarily are included in the general public, as we have a stake somewhat in the industry, particularly if you get paid for this type of work. But, Dad, would you like to go first or second on this?
Oh, I'll go first. First off, industry. It was green-lighted. It's been still one of the all-time greatest R-rated films as far as box office ever. It's still, apparently people are interested in it and watching it. There's still a lot of people who love the movie in the industry. It's on a lot of lists. The public, I think there's, so the industry, I'm going to give it a 4.5. But for the public, I'm going to give it a little less. I'm going to give it a 4 because there is a strong group of people who want nothing to do with this. Either they've seen it and don't want to ever watch it again because of its dark nature, or there's a lot of people who said, I will not watch it because of its dark nature. And so I went with a 4. So 9.4 or 5 overall.
So I think there's going to be just some distinct differences between you and I when it comes to this film as to how we have it scored, already voiced in this opening category. I have it a little bit lower, and by a little bit lower, I mean at least a couple of points difference. I think that the industry reluctantly leans into this movie, but given the nature of how the critics were at the time and kind of the after effect, if this movie didn't make any money, they wouldn't give a shit. They don't like comic book films. They don't like the fact that this made a ton of money. They really don't like the fact that it got Oscars attention outside of like Joaquin. And now the fact that it has a sequel, which, yes, they greenlit on a basis that the audience was still all for it. And I think it will garner a lot of attention and audience participation. Like it will make money, particularly given that Lady Gaga is going to be in it and it's a musical. So I do think there's buzz building into this movie, but I think the industry only cares about it in so much as it's going to make money. And by that standpoint, I only have it at a 3.5. On a public side, I agree with you, but I take off a full point for that. So I'm at a 4. in the general public and how it has to. There are enough people like myself that have an issue with this movie generally. So in that vein, I have a 7.5.
Don't tell me it's my turn. Okay. Okay, so I feel like the legacy for me, I feel it's decreased. Why? In the industry. Because I feel like now they're after Joaquin, after his, like now you could see all the critics that kind of drooled over the film. And I'm like, you know what? Now Joker sucks. I can finally say it's a bad thing. So I feel like they have an antagonism to Joaquin, or at least this is what I see. Like they really hate him now. They're out to get him because he kind of like left the Todd Haynes new film all of a sudden without giving notice. People are losing money. So I feel like it kind of like dropped down to 2. The public, I'd say 3.5. And why is that? Because I think the public didn't really get affected by the same industry antagonism toward the film. Like now they're talking, and the problem with film Twitter, I think, in the critic circuit is they talk as if they're the public, but they're not. You guys are not the public. The public is the people we meet in the streets. Like, do you still like Joker? Yeah, I love Joker. Or like I didn't care, or it has really bad messages. So these people will stay the way they are. But the industry, I feel like it came down because of now they're starting to discover that Joaquin is not that good of an actor. So yeah, this is why I gave it like let's say a 2 and a 3.5. So I think 5.5 in total, probably.
I think that might make me the median point on this one.
Hold it. I like your points on the industry, so I'll come down to a 3.5 also.
Yes, Zane. Let's go.
I was probably inflating it because I was worried that I was being too harsh. No. But that's fine. I appreciate.
So you're at an 8.5 now?
Yes. So, and I will say that Joker as the 19th century emperor of France was interesting.
Yes.
All right, so that's a 7.17 average between the three of us for the opening category. All right, impact and significance might be a little easier category. It's basically the same as legacy, except for the first 5 years that we just discounted. So roughly from the time that it was released up through now, which might be very similar to legacy in some regards. What is the overall way that this film has been felt, both in the industry and in the general audience? I will say that I think Joaquin as a figure has an elevated status because of the movie, not just because he's finally an Oscar winner, but as far as the casual fan goes, I think the hardcore cinemaphiles, when he was doing like The Master and he was doing Paul Thomas Anderson movies like Inherent Vice and such, he was getting more credit for when he did Her. That was something that cinemaphiles saw. But the general public had no idea, outside of Gladiator, who Joaquin really was. Maybe if you caught the weird interview with David Letterman, which I still don't know whether that was staged or not. But given the fact
but wow.
Well, I thought it was kind of like poetic justice that the climactic scene also is on a late night talk show.
Yeah.
He comes out and he's like silent for a few minutes, and I'm like, is he doing this over again? But anyway, I digress. So I do think that because at the moment that this was released, it did have some critical buzz. I do think it has deteriorated over time. But in the initial moment, which I'll give it a little bit more credit because we're only 5 years out, and usually this is a measure of the first 5 years, it's hard to say that this movie didn't at least have some critical acclaim, given 11 Oscar nominations in a year where we thought there were like some gargantuan all-time films. I mean, we're talking later this year about several of them. We had Parasite in the same year. We already had visited this earlier this summer. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We had 1917, Marriage Story. I mean, this was a great year in film, and yet this thing had 5 different nominations, including for director and several of the other technical awards. So it's hard to say that this didn't at least garner some appreciation within the industry, even if it wasn't necessarily in the critic community. So on that note, I also think you cannot discount that this was the highest grossing R-rated movie at the time, the first one to cross the $1 billion mark, et cetera, et cetera. This was a huge thing internationally. So from an industry side, I have a 4. From a public side, I have a 5. I have a 9 overall.
I will go next just because it'll be easy. Ditto.
Short but sweet.
That's all I need to say. I have nothing really to add because, again, I think there were a lot of critics who hated the film, but there were some that liked it. And there were even those that hated it, loved Joaquin's performance. And the public ate it up.
Definitely for me, the impact is different. Like, I gave the impact the same as both of you. Because, hello, first of all, it has a sequel. This means it made an impact. All those Oscar nominations, it caused a stir. And I think the impact does not change, but the legacy in my mind, kind of, yes, because of the antagonism toward, like Joaquin. This is why I give it a lesser rating. But definitely I give it a 4 in impact because it left an impact on the filmmaking industry, on a lot of things. It has a sequel now, and it's even a hyped sequel, even though with all the problems. So definitely I give it a 4. I give the public 3 too, because I felt like the public does not change. So since I gave it in the beginning 3, now it's 3. So it was just like, this is how I saw it in my head. So overall, it's like a 7.
All right, so that is an 8.33 average between the three of us. Let's go to Novelty, which, if you have not been with us before, is a measurement, for the most part, of the originality of the concept and then of the execution. We also divide this category, or at least have recently done so. On this one, I think I probably should go first, given that I'm going to be able to address more of the novelty aspects of the comic book nature of it. First off, making a dark, R-rated comic book film had already been done. Logan had come out years before this and was a much better film, at least in my mind. You also have had others, different takes and various takes generally. I mean, the X-Men films, when they were first coming out, were decent, and those had a lot more to say. I think that the Christopher Nolan Batmans have a lot to do and project on this particular universe. And for the most part, most of the critical reviews said it's a very thinly veiled combination of Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. So I can't really give this all that much credit on an originality standpoint, since it seems to be standing on the shoulders of not only the comic book industry and fervor to get butts in the seats, but possibly 2 of the greatest films of one of the greatest directors of all time. So 1.5, maybe. I'll be a little bit soft on that angle. As far as the execution, I think from a technical standpoint, I don't have anything bad to say on it. I think it's just slightly above replacement. The musical score is fine. I do actually like the use of the old classic, American songbook classic songs to it. I've always been kind of a fan of that Sinatra era of song making and whatever else. So incorporating those into the general gist of the film, even though it really is not, it does not vibe with how those songs are meant to be heard. Those are supposed to be much more upbeat and kind of in the mood, as opposed to this really dark, gritty take on something. I do think from a technical standpoint, as well as Joaquin's acting, I have to give it a few additional points in that favor, even if I don't think that necessarily it's the best executed thing I've ever seen. So I give it a 3.5 on that side. I have a 5 overall.
As you did say this, okay, you had never seen The King of Comedy. I have. I would also throw out, it's just not just 2 Scorsese films, but I'll give one to another one that I thought this was based upon a little bit, that has had a large cult following. It's a Brian De Palma film, Scarface. If you blend those 3 films together, you get this. And then you put it within the context of the mega universe that is completely dominating movies. I don't find this to be that novel at all in concept at all. In fact, if I were Scorsese, I would have asked for a portion of the box office, because I think it's a direct ripoff. And so I'm giving the Novelty a 1. Just the fact that the way that they established Joker at least deserves some merit. Otherwise, I would probably go less. So I'm going to go there. Execution. It's dark. I don't see that it's any different than any of the other Batman films as far as darkness. Now, I will give it some in execution because Joker is by himself, but do I really want to reward the execution for creating a character which exemplifies a point or a situation that I'm finding very difficult to live with in modern American culture, which is gun violence and the ease by which people treat life? I will obviously get that more when we get into culture, or excuse me, classicness. But I will give it a 2.5 for execution, simply because of the way it was handled in relation to the other Marvel or DC comic book films. So I'm going with a 4.5 overall.
Yeah, that's not how math works.
Oh, did I miss that?
You said 2.5 and 1, didn't you?
3.5, excuse me.
So please
What
repeat
happens
that.
when I don't write it down? That's why I went into law.
Okay. But Thomas, you gotta watch, like King of Comedy. Sorry, I can't. You have to watch it. Come on.
I will get to everything, but the possibility to get to every movie on the planet that everyone else wants to see will take years.
You make recommendation lists from all of your friends and your dad, and start watching one of each list. Okay, this is how you go, and start with In the Mood for Love, definitely. For me, the novelty, I agree with you on the originality. Oh, what is original about Joker? We love Joker, this film, but it's not original. It's ripping off a lot of things blender-wise, and then you get this Joker, and there's nothing original even, like even in the concept itself, you know what I mean? So definitely one. Execution, okay, I like the movie. I like the visual style. I like how it was executed. So I was between 3.5 to 4, so I will start to be a little bit kind to it. I'll give it a 4, so it's a total of 5.
So we have a 4.5 average between the three of us. Classicness. Dad, this is usually your category to lead.
I always start with a 7. Okay, and then I work up or down. Now, I will say that it does do a very good job of conveying what mental illness is and what can set individuals off and what constitutes the basis of a life that ends up being a sociopath. Okay? However, how many school shootings, how many mass public shootings do we have to have before we stop creating characters which glorify them? I am waiting for some idiot to go into a school or public setting dressed as frickin' Joker and start shooting people because they're perceived as being wronged by this group or that group or whatever. In this day and age, in this culture, this is the best we can do for entertainment, is to come up with this kind of crap. I'm sorry. I'm just very upset about this because we have seen too many innocent lives snuffed out way too young for no reason other than we just have this sick fascination with violence in this country as a remedy for everything that pisses us off. Whether it's somebody comes on our property, shoot them. If it's somebody cuts us off on the highway, shoot them. No, I can't go there. So I'm at a 5 overall. And that's being generous, by the way. I wanted to go lower, but I thought maybe my soapbox was a little too high.
I mean, I don't have any issues with what you've said. I mean, if I'm going to take an objective look at it, it's not going to get really any points up per se. I mean, you might be able to say that it gets a +1 for some timeliness, but again, I think this is somewhat of a ripoff of Taxi Driver, so I can't say that this is a more educated stance than that movie was, which is done 50 years ago, essentially. And I think that still is probably the better film to watch on this entire endeavor as far as mental illness and people that are vigilantes within society that don't feel seen, but want to clean up the streets with a gun type of thing. Kind of a weird pseudo-modern Western type aspect that I don't know. I guess my biggest issue with the movie is I still either I don't know what the point is, or I'm afraid to guess at what the actual point is. And so from that standpoint, I do think it gets down a couple of points for me, again, for the celebration of violence and such. I had a 6. I would be comfortable going lower, but I was trying to be a little bit forgiving. But I don't know. It's tough to say what this movie and its sequel really are adding to the culture at large. I mean, if culture is supposed to be, or if the film industry is supposed to be a reflection of culture, what does this actually say about us?
Okay, I definitely will agree with Dana's rating because 5 is good. I don't think it has aged well at all. Like now, like I told you, when I saw it in 2019 and I was younger and I was in a really bad place, so it definitely kind of moved me. But it felt like when people are kind of emotionally baiting you in a way, like you're having a bad day at work and you go and watch Joker, so you definitely like it and you see it as this cool, great movie. But then you mature and you turn into a different version of yourself and you watch it and you feel like, but this is bleak and this is sad and this is scary and this has all kinds of messages. So definitely I'm giving it a 5 because yes, it's a good character study, but every other aspect also it left a cultural impact, but it's a toxic impact. You know what I mean? It's not something that we should celebrate, but more kind of like denounce or analyze and write about in introspective analysis so that we at least can kind of make other people aware of sometimes the hidden messages in film and how they should pay more attention. So definitely it will be given a 5 for my part.
So what I'm going to do on this one, it looks like we've come to a general consensus around a 5. I will also move mine to reflect that, and we'll just average it out to a 5. Not just because of the easy math, but I do think that we've kind of all generally agreed in that category anyway. All right, let's move to rewatchability on this one. Applying our patented, well, I guess it's not our patent, but the Kieran B test. How likely am I to put this on of my own volition? Boy, I don't want to go 0, but it's like 0.5. I just, if I'm going to watch a comic book film, I'm going to watch something else. I really have no desire to ever see this. It's just not something. If I weren't forced to do it, partially by putting it of my own volition on the schedule so that I got it out of the way, I really don't feel like we need to revisit this. I think we will do it justice, and then we can move on. But how likely am I to leave it on if I find it on anywhere? Oh boy. I mean, if I'm going to my own rubric on this, am I turning it off immediately? No. But is it getting to a full 5 minutes where if there's nothing else on? I mean, maybe. So let's go 1.5. I think I have a 2. Whichever of you would like to go.
0.
Okay, well, that's
Not
pretty
gonna
definitive.
watch it again. No, it's enough for me 2 times in a row.
Well, I mean, you could have gotten away with 1, but okay.
No,
Fair
because
enough.
it made me very I was so depressed and sad. So I was like, no, I'm not going to watch this again. So this intense reaction, this is what I'm telling you.
I couldn't go to 0, and this is why. 2 reasons. 1, I now have seen it, and so I can now talk to people who are watching this film or who like this film and point out why this film is not worth your time. Okay? That's number 1. Number 2, I would love to put this on to somebody who's I don't know, novice. Is that the best word to use? Somebody that doesn't know a lot about cinema and wants to learn something. Is But I wouldn't make them watch more than 15 to 20 minutes, half an hour of this. And then I'd say, okay, now you see the dark tone of this and how it works. Now let's go to a film noir. Let's put on like Double Indemnity, where the quality of the film is much better. It's dark, and you can see the point of it, and ultimately they lose. That's, you're not making them into the heroes of this mess. I also went with a 2 for that reason. I am never watching this film again unless it's for that point. And I am praying the sequel does not get nominated.
So I think this might be the lowest rewatchability score we've ever had for a movie, and that includes The Room.
The Room was hilarious. That's why.
It's a 1.33 average between the three of us.
Yes. I toast. To be honest, at this point in time, I would have a hard time sitting there. If I found out it's a Todd Phillips film, I would have a hard time going and watching it.
It's kind of reminding me that Lars von Trier is making another film, and I'm like, no, stop. No one needs your messed up, crazy, like perverted head anymore. You're not even a good pervert. You're not De Palma. You know what I mean? Like a genius.
The self-proclaimed Nazi. Yeah, let's
like who
bring
needs
that out
this
of
guy?
story.
Seriously, like, and he's like making a new movie. No. Stay. Didn't you like retire or something?
For audience score on this one, we had an 88 for Google users and an 89 for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 8.85. So to repeat the categories on this one, for Legacy, we have a 7.17. For Impact and Significance, we had an 8.33. For Novelty, we had a 4.5. Classicness, a 5. Rewatchability, a 1.33. Maybe someday we'll define what a 0 is on one of these categories. Audience score, we had an 8.85.
Revolutionary Road.
Thanks for the side commentary.
That's a 0.
Okay.
It is to me.
Well, we're still on Joker, Dad. I won't make you watch Revolutionary Road for a while.
Thanks.
You're very welcome.
I think I'll be ill that week if we do.
Well, you do have an out at any time. You could just take a waiver. But anyway, leaving us a final total of 35.18. And placing it on our list, scrolling. Between Touch of Evil and Friday for 199th on the list.
Oh.
And to be fair, it is the 207th entry on the list.
What?
So 199 of 207.
Tells you a lot.
Oh, it did beat The Room, and it did beat
The Greatest Show on Earth. Okay,
yes.
So since you're asking, all right, here are the ones that would be above. Friday, Blood Simple, which really shouldn't be that far down on the list.
It should not be that low.
Well, but it was a small opening film. That's the only reason it's down that far.
Yeah.
I think it's a much better film that deserves to be that far down on the list. But The Help, The Quiet Man, Wedding Crashers, Victory, The Greatest Show on Earth, and The Room, which is dead last. So, if you disagreed with any of our scoring, have any backlash on how we treated maybe possibly your favorite film, although I'm not sure I want to necessarily hear from you if this is your favorite film, you can write us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at Gmoat Podcast, GMOAT, on Twitter, X, Letterboxd, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can also find us at our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmoat Podcast. Let's move to remaining questions for this one. Did we need the Thomas Wayne subplot? I know that we generally discussed removing some of the comic book elements of this one, but why? I just...
Oh, you didn't. There was nothing that followed the plot line other than that. I didn't see anything that looked like Batman or anything that would be, related to Batman till they mentioned Thomas Wayne.
It was weird to see, for any fans of The Great out there, General Varlamentov playing Alfred the Butler. But yeah, I definitely didn't need the Thomas Wayne thing. In my mind, Thomas Wayne is supposed to be somewhat of a saintly figure for the most part, and to try and besmirch his name in order to make the Joker the half-brother of Bruce Wayne, please, just stop. Just, please, for the love of God, stop.
But Thomas, I'm interested to know, did you like Matt Reeves, the Batman?
It's okay. I think it's fine, but it's not necessarily like, I don't think it's doing anything particularly novel. Partly because I think it didn't land the plane on the movie, but I'm sure we will address that one in a couple of years when that comes up on the 5-year anniversary. Partially because our favorite Scooby-Doo villain believes that is the best Batman film, and I just generally disagree with that take.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah, well, everybody has their Batman film, and they also have their bad opinions. Anyway, moving on.
I like Adam West.
You would. Why would people see Arthur as a hero?
You really want me to get into this? Because I could start going down political aspects here. Same thing. And I don't want to. My head hurts as it is.
So we'll just remove the question. It's fine.
It's kind of scary, even from an international standpoint. Like, I could tell you a lot of the reasons why internationally the film resonated, but I don't really I hate politics so much. I don't know. So definitely won't get into that.
Oh, and, it's going on. Poland, Hungary, France, Germany. I mean,
the world is going crazy. Yeah.
Well, people feel like they have no control over things, and in part they do, but that's accurate. But this is not the remedy.
Any remaining questions for either of you?
Yes. Why did you guys think Arthur pursued a career in comedy? Because now I think when Dana said that he understood the stand-up scene, I want to know why an unfunny guy would be obsessed. Actually, a terrible, sad, miserable fuck would actually be obsessed in pursuing a career in comedy. I know that, of course, some of the most comedians are actually terrible, depressed people in real life. And I understand that comedy actually stems from sometimes all the hardships and the trauma that you face. Like me, I like to joke about my traumas. But I want to know why this particular character, like, what is the mindset?
As a short, fat kid through school, I was pretty much one of the class comedians. I learned how to do impressions. I learned how to do self-deprecating humor. I learned how to do insults. I did everything because if I kept them laughing, they couldn't laugh at me. And so it only makes sense because comedy comes from a place, for people, especially comedians, comes from a place of pain.
That's so true. That's so true. It usually is.
I think I've said it on here before that I think the equation for comedy is tragedy plus time. And from that standpoint, he's a tragic figure who's now had some of the benefit of time to get a reflection on himself. Personally, I think the only reason he does stand-up is because there is a failed comic angle to The Killing Joke by Alan Moore, which they're trying to incorporate. So it's elements of the comic book more than anything else that they're trying to do. But, okay, fine. The other thing is there are a lot of really unfunny people that think they're hilarious. And so it's just one more thing that might set him off or push him over the edge. And when you're counting King of Comedy as an influence, well, here you go.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just one last question. Do you think, because for me, she is the mother the real villain of the film? Because I think she is. She created this monster and unleashed him on the society, which happens a lot.
I'm not sure I would necessarily label her as the primary antagonist or villain. I think that the film is leading us to believe that it's the structural disadvantages that he's had his entire life. He was abandoned as a child. He was taken in by someone who may or may not have been mentally stable. He was abused to the point where he now has a mental health condition, possibly a neurological condition for this pathological laughter. He has not felt appreciation or pretty much anybody that really has been caring toward him outside of, I guess, Gary. So he has to make up in his own mind these fantasies of his next door neighbor, even feigning attention towards him to feel some sort of warmth or closeness. I would guess that the mother is more symptomatic of a widespread issue that, again, if you're to be kind and forgiving to the movie, it's identifying yet again an issue structurally with people in these circumstances, people who have been largely forgotten, that are incapable of, well, not incapable, but through maybe no fault of their own, incapable of getting the help that they need to be functional people in society. And we have drugged the ladder up behind us. We leave people behind constantly in this country. And as a result, we should not be unexpectant that these people exist and have no other means when they say, I have nothing left to lose, than to go out in some sort of weird blaze of glory where they think their death matters more than their life.
Mother in this particular case is not the ultimate protagonist, because absence of this aspect or this issue is where life ceases to have meaning, and that's the loss of hope. If you have no hope, you are in complete despair, and it's black. It's a bottomless pit. She's the one thing in this film where there's actually hope. She keeps talking about how she's going to contact Thomas Wayne and he's going to help them. That's the only hope that was envisioned in this entire film. So for that reason, she cannot be the ultimate problem.
I love these answers. Very eye-opening.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank our guest for being on with us. You've been well in tune with our choice here, even if you didn't necessarily enjoy the film this time around. So I guess that's a good thing. But either way, you will be back with us for another unusual selection for our Halloween film when we do Saw here in a few weeks. But just remind the audience again where they can find you and what you're working on.
I'm working on this piece on the duality of nature of Catwoman, which I'm very excited about. And I'm doing a bunch of interviews, video interviews on the J Days YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter, Jaylan_Salah. You can find me on Instagram, Jaylan Salman. And you can find me on YouTube, of course, the J Days YouTube channel. And read all my stuff on In Session, Geek Vibes Nation, and Keith Loves Movies.
Excellent. All right, Dad, any quick final thoughts for the week?
I'm going to try this week to see Wolves.
The George Clooney film that we did talk about on Film versus Film.
I have a whole list of classic movies I've been recording off of various platforms on, and trying to check off watching. And I have started the 1967 for our sister podcast.
Cousin. It's technically on its own network. We haven't incorporated it into the grander Ronnie Duncan Studios network, just because I don't want to apply any peer pressure or anything. But yes, our cousin podcast, The Revisionist Almanac, which we'll be recording here for November for a December release, I think.
Yeah, and I started out with a film that I had seen seen advertised when I was a kid and never saw and wish I wouldn't have known.
Well, you'll have to find out about that in December. So a little bit of a tease 2 months in advance. As for me, I am a little bit excited. We're just kind of getting into the first inklings of the award season, and there are a few different films that I'm a little bit excited for now. I always say this, and I think that when we did our, the New Year's celebration that Andrew hosted, that we were trying to talk, what's your most anticipated film upcoming for the next year? And I kind of, to some, made a cop-out answer that it's the one that you don't know yet. But this is always that time of the year where you get these out of nowhere films that come and surprise you. And I think already we're getting that with like The Brutalist. And I think there's a Tom Hiddleston film that won the TIFF Audience Award that I'm excited to see. You've got some of the other favorites that we kind of anticipated in Sing Sing and Conclave that are kind of rising to the top of lists, but it's kind of that anticipatory eagerness to see some of these films. I just hope for the love of God that I can survive the first semester of law school so I might be able to see some of them.
Can I say my most anticipated 2025 film? More than anything?
Sure.
Caught Stealing, starring Austin Butler, directed by Darren Aronofsky. It's going to be a great crime thriller. I can't wait for it, honestly. It's like killing me with excitement. So yeah, this is 2025. But 2024, there's a lot. All the picks that you just mentioned are just so good. Also, Baby Girl, Anora, like a lot of things. So yeah, exciting years, hopefully.
So that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. Everyone knows that complicated is a code word for bitch. Next week, for our 231st episode, we welcome new guest Peterson W. Hill, co-host of the War Starts at Midnight podcast, and our most frequent guest, Christine Duncan, to discuss Gone Girl for its 10th anniversary. Directed by David Fincher, written by Gillian Flynn, music by Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor, starring Ben Affleck, Rosamund Pike, Tyler Perry, Neil Patrick Harris, and Carrie Coons. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at thenewRonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, X, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.